and somebody very observantly in the room pointed out that there was these large crowds of people showing up to the ski resort, and all the resources that they had dumped into teaching a new beginning skier how to ski. They could walk right in, pick up their equipment and gear, walk right out to an instructor, and by midday, folks were skiing. They were out on their own. They were actually participating. And it seemed like just a monumental mountain for us to try and climb to dig our own way out of it. I really at the time wondered if a government agency could even move fast enough to make the changes needed to start to reverse that decline. Along the way, I remember sitting down during those meetings when the first drafts of what would eventually become the ORAM, or the Outdoor Recreation Adoption Model, came to be. And if those early drafts were on this screen for you today, it would be a lot of boxes, a lot of lines, a lot of words, so much to absorb, and what this thing has become, I think, is just critical to, understanding at least a little bit on where my mindset is and where our agency's mindset is about this. I thought this would be a great opportunity also for me to make it as pretty as I think this path is in my mind, because most of the time you just see boxes and arrows. But this was really important to start to recognize that it wasn't just recruitment and retention, but we had reactivation. There was this pathway that was clearly defined for what the customer experience was as they moved their way into first entering the world of hunting and fishing, to continuing with their support and continuing without support, even down to how they lapse and disappear from us, and some things that we might need to address and consider as we try to pull them back in as low-hanging fruit for our customers. The other thing that was really outstanding from my standpoint was the identification of a lot of the contributing factors. And as I looked at those lists in the early days, I, for me, recognized that there are things that we can control, and there are things that we can't control as an agency. And some of those that really looked like low-hanging fruit to me were the issues on the hunting side of lack of mentors, the hunter education requirements, the lack of exposure, regulation complexity, lack of skills-based training, cost of licenses, and not having someone to fish with, and not having these complex regulations. Things like health and age, you can't help that. You can't control that. We all get older, and we all have issues throughout our life that sometimes impact the process, and it's just out of our control. But identifying those key factors, I think, was really, really important, that allowed us to look at some things that maybe we could do a little bit different. So one of the things in New Mexico that we jumped on early on was trying to figure out exactly who our customer was. Like most agencies, we had process where people came in and would buy a license. It was a paper process, and records weren't connected, and you really couldn't necessarily tell your customers in great detail who they were and how long they had been buying licenses. Really difficult to tell if they had lapsed, and what if we needed to do something to bring them back into the game. And so one of the things that took place right away early on for us was the implementation of a mandatory customer identification number for our customers. We kind of leveraged this against a process that we already had in place, which was a paper application process apply for big game hunts in New Mexico. And so by leveraging that need for people and that desire of people to want to apply for those hunts, we were able to push this mandatory customer identification number onto them. We got way ahead of it. We did a lot of outreach and a lot of PR, putting out the press releases, getting the word out that we were going to move from paper applications. Just to give you an idea, those paper applications in the past looked like this. A lot of boxes, a lot of writing, Believe it or not, people would fill these out, and they would mail them in, and then we would hire a large group of temporary staff to sit down and manually type in everything that people had just written. And so there's a motivating side to getting buy-in within our own agency on that, and that was the reduction and streamlining of a workload that was taking place in our agency. But it also, went beyond that. It was allowing the customers to have a little bit more control over their own application and knowing that what they put in is what they were applying for and what they were going to get. And so that was a really, really important step for us, and perhaps the most important as we journeyed our path towards realizing some success here. Next thing that we did as we moved on is that we created a online licensing system. In a rural state like New Mexico, it's often difficult to get to the licensed vendors or to a department office to pick up a license. And this by creating a license system that would allow our customers to buy it, whether on a mobile device, on their computer, just able to get that license and be able to literally go out fishing the next day, pick up those licenses right before, say, dove season started, was really critical. It also allowed, because this became an online system, it allowed for the potential for people who wanted to VIN license or provide at least that opportunity for people to buy their own license to expand. So even retailers who want our traditional licensed vendor, as long as they had an internet connection and a computer and a printer, a customer is able to get in and buy a license and print those things out and get out in the field. And it really was about just providing that customer service that was genuinely needed all along, really. Our online licensing system is a system that we built in-house, and I'm very blessed by it being an in-house product because it really meets our specific needs. By having the experts who built it sitting right down the hall in our information services division, which is, for some of you all, your IT departments or your IT divisions, having the folks that built it right down the hall who can make the changes and tweak it really helps us to give the customers what they want, where they want it, when they want it, and to make the adjustments and tweaks necessary along the way to really meet their need. And so that was a really big step forward for us as we moved on to the next steps. And our third step that we had to address, our agency, like most, had been providing education in the very typical fashion that we all had. Literally for more than 50 years, the New Mexico Department in Game and Fish had engaged our youth through a very traditional approach to education. And when we were recognizing the majority of our success through our safety record, we had to acknowledge that we had been failing in sustaining and our growth and participation and interest in hunting and fishing. To put it really simply, our education classes taught indoors were boring, and they were failing to inspire the next generation that wanted to engage in the very activities we were trying to teach. And so we took a very drastic approach in New Mexico and really made a shift to the way that we delivered education. Our programs today look very different. They're taught outdoors to our students of all ages, and they're taught in an outdoor environment. They're focusing on skills. We're teaching people the nuts and bolts of baiting a hook and catching a fish. We're teaching people how to shoot and be proficient in shooting, giving them the confidence and skills that they need to be successful when they go out in the outdoors. Another really important component to our programs is that, we believe that inclusion is the key. In our programs, no one is excluded. We take the opportunity of the feel-good youth programs that exist out there. Everybody likes a good kid program. Those are easy to sell. But when you start talking about educating the parents and the adults, that tends to not be necessarily as glamorous, and it's not the thing that a lot of times gets those key decision makers excited. Well, what we have done with our camps and with our education programs is that when we have parents that attend, much to their surprise, they're in for an education themselves. We don't turn them away. We include them. We engage them. We recognize that their participation is critical because often those are the exact people who will be the support for our next generation, our youth, that want to get out there and hunt and fish. The other thing that I know many of you have heard me say, but I do believe fishing is the gateway drug to this. And so our programs don't miss that opportunity to provide an opportunity for someone to have an experience. So if you attend a hunter ed camp or you attend a hunt with us and we have an opportunity to get you out fishing, we will also get you out fishing. Sometimes when we're doing fishing, we will use those opportunities to engage people and kind of cross-educate them into hunting opportunities or get them engaged in our hunter education programs. I do think that it's much easier to pull somebody into the ranks of hunting who have openly accepted fishing already. The big piece to that is that once you've included them into a sportsman or sportswoman community, they need to feel like they have an opportunity right here to engage in the activities that we talk about, be a part of that community. And fishing as an over-the-counter opportunity in most states gives you that immediate gratification for many of our customers. And just to show you a little bit of what some of our camps look like now, this is a drastically different view of a classroom in comparison to the old classes where we used to sit them indoors. Many of today's folks need just even some of the basic skills of learning to build a campfire, learning how to cook, how to set up their tents, and we're providing all of that on every opportunity when they come out to attend the programs that are being put on. Our camps now have live fire components. We teach them how to shoot. We teach them how to use a shotgun. We teach them how to fish, how to fish, how to fish, how to fish. It is critically important. And so as we made that shift and change to our education programs here in the state, right off the bat, this was just tried and true for our agency across the board. R3 is not an I&E issue. It's not your R3 coordinator's issue. It's everyone's issue. And we've taken a very agency-wide approach. I'm not the person in our agency with all the answers, and nor is anyone. We all own it in this agency. We all have created our own buy-in and ownership on R3, and that extends from our biologists, our IT staff, our licensing staff, folks who work in our call center, and very specifically our officers in the field. They own this. They come up with incredibly great ideas along the way that really have made our programs blossom. Our nonprofit partners, folks like the Mule Deer Foundation and Wild Turkey Federation, the SCI, Rocky Mountain Elk, Trout Unlimited, all of those folks have brought resources to the table and have participated with us hand in hand in creating great programs. And I think that's very critical that you create that synergy, because no one person can pick this up and make the heavy lift that's required to make a program successful. One of the other big changes that we made in our education programs was a shift to an online hunter education opportunity for folks. We do provide 100% online hunter education certification through our program to New Mexico residents who are ages 11 years or older. We still offer our traditional classes and our field days and live fire. But one of the things that we just had to stop and recognize at our department is that much of this next generation learns online, and they're offering major degree programs around this country today, 100% online, and people are going into their fields of profession and doing this. It was hard for us to imagine that after just a two-day class that some of that content couldn't be taught online and that they wouldn't absorb it. What we've done is that we take a lot of our online students, as is the case when you make such a drastic paradigm shift in your agency. Many of our online students are the first that we target for many of our skills-based camps, and we do so that we're making sure that we're continuing the piece that made everybody comfortable with Hunter Ed programs in the past, and that was that safety record. But for us, what we've seen is that the kids who are going through this and adults who are going through this program online are retaining the information that we want them to retain, and they actually show up at many of our camps and clinics quite proficient in many of the areas that we need them to be proficient in to start to teach more advanced skills. And so I think our folks have done a great job with that. I wouldn't say that any one particular discipline across the board has outperformed the others. We did not have a mad rush on just the online option. We still have tons of folks who participate in those other traditional class, field day, live fire kind of opportunities. But the one thing that did go away for us as an agency was the constant complaint that we didn't have enough classes to help meet their needs. It's a far stretch these days to say that you can't get into one of our classes and eliminate one of the barriers that kind of stood in the way for a long time in making progress in R3. So what's most impressive to me is the effort that the department's put forth and all the people that are involved in it. I'm focusing in really heavily a little bit on our educators and our conservation officers because we do have performance measures that we report each year that really hit the numbers hard for me, so I can look at real numbers and see the real results. And so I can't say enough about, the education staff that I have in my division, and I can't say enough about our officers who are working out there in the field. Our 13 educators and 70 conservation officers in last year alone went out and conducted 934 camps. They taught 48,000 New Mexico youth. We know that in each of those instances, there were countless families and adults and parents and mentors that were attached with that, and that number is substantially higher. But the big difference was that we went from a situation where we were reaching 1% to 2% of our youth population in this state to reaching almost 10%. I challenge anybody in our state to say that they've outperformed our folks. Those officers have gone out there and conducted countless classes. They show up in the classroom. They show up and do camps. They teach people how to fish. They teach them how to hunt. They run those camps just like the rest of our staff, and what you get out of that is a lot of people helping to make that heavy lift that's involved in reaching the number of people that you want to be reaching to make a dent in our programs. And so then the last thing that we did here that was really important for us was just to go to some basic marketing 101. Once you've built a really great program, it's easy to promote. And the one thing I've learned, I worked for many years in newspapers and many years in ad agencies, and I understand those basics. I understand even creative marketing. But at the end of the day, the one thing I've really learned is that consistency is the key to getting your word out, and that everything needs to focus around the customer service and customer experience. And so we consistently have been just putting the word out about these great programs and opportunities and how easy it is to get into our system and get into hunting and fishing, pushing it through our website. We have plenty of social media, and our social media front, we engage a little bit different than I think some folks do. We're continually talking about over here how social media for us is a lot like an extension of our customer call center. We try to answer and engage with our customers. If you make a mistake, it's a conversation, and we have those conversations with those folks on those social media platforms. It's really helped our numbers and number of people who engage on those platforms grow substantially. What I'm really even more impressed is that audience that engages in social media with us to learn about all the variety of things that we do above and beyond just hunting and fishing, but all the work that we do on non-game species, the habitat work we do, restoration of species in this state, all that work that's going on really engages a much broader community. And so we've used that to our benefit to try and tell our story. Our email campaigns is ever growing, and we are one of the agencies who uses GovDelivery as our mass email platform. And we have managed to capture, by utilizing that CIN number that we capture off our customers, capture legitimate email addresses to those customers. And today, I'm somebody who can proudly say this agency has greater reach than any media agency or organization in this state. On any given day, we can put out our message to a much larger audience than any of them are even able to do. And so it's really helped us to control our own message and to get our own story out. Routinely, we have emails that go out to hundreds of thousands of people in this state, and it's really been a huge opportunity for us. We do the normal press releases, and we write feature stories for different publications. I'm not real huge over here on TV, not that I don't think that there's some value in it, but I just don't think that we have the kind of dollars to make it as effective. So we put a lot more focus on radio. We have some really nice economical billboards where we strategically place messages around the state. And a lot of times with billboards, what you're really looking at is it's a second or third-dairy message that's just reinforcing mostly what you're putting out there. And so our billboards focus a lot on fish in New Mexico, and they focus on things like bear awareness messages or even recruiting officers to our department, and just create some awareness for folks to recognize that they can engage with us. Push our publications. We've taken our vehicles and turned them into rolling billboards. We have tailgate wraps on everything and trailer wraps, and then just really with all the folks that we have out there, we do a lot of outreach, and there's nothing that beats that face-to-face, word-of-mouth advertising. When you can get out there and talk to people and share with them what's going on, it's really important. You know, I like to think back to some of the big discussions that we've had along the way about numbers and the number of people that we reach. And, you know, is this really effective? Because did we get to 10,000 or 50,000 people for this particular event? And sometimes you don't. Sometimes you hit one. Sometimes, you know, it's you have 10 people out there at an event and you're doing those things. But I think it's important for folks to just recognize that if you can plant the right seed in the right people's minds, that spreads. Those folks will go home and they sneeze it. I call them my sneezers. If you can get that out in front of them, they'll go out and help spread your message as well. And so we just look at everybody that we talk to as being important and valuable to us as a customer. And I think that's just really critical for us along the way. So the nuts and bolts on this thing, as I kind of wound down a little bit on this, I just wanted to show you all what the numbers look like, what's taken place along the way. And you can see in both the hunting and fishing side, each step of the way, from our mandatory customer identification number to implementing the e-license, add in skills-based education, and then marketing, the rise in our numbers. from 2011, which is kind of the benchmark. That was the end of the road for us, where we were really declining. To that following year, when we started to implement these things and engage our customers a little more strongly, we've had some substantial growth along the way. In the hunting side, it's amounted to a 75% growth from 2011 to 2017. And on our fishing side, it's been 172% growth in licensed sales on our fishing side. I think with the number of years that are stacked behind it, you can see that it wasn't a fluke, a one-year fluke. I think that we've really taken the steps necessary to sustain our growth and make this last and stick for us. And so one of the last things as I close this up, before I start taking a bunch of questions, I think Teddy Roosevelt's quote stands tried and true. When he said that in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is nothing. I think nothing could be more true. We spend a lot of time in a lot of these meetings and that talking about evaluation, and forgive me for some of you that are really, really committed to that aspect of R3, because there's so much of it I agree with, and I recognize it's important as well. But for us in this state, we didn't have the staff and resources at the time to spend too much time worrying about if we were going to be able to measure how every little thing worked. It became very critical for us to do something. We had to go do something. And we had to pump, be adaptable, make changes as we move through our programs on the fly, and be willing to fail. It's okay if you fail, but what's not okay is to sit there and spend so much time trying to decide if your program is going to work that you fail to do anything. And I just think that is just so important to recognize when we talk about R3. We've got to get out there, and we've got to implement the programs and make the changes necessary. The last thing I would say is you know, you have to get the support of all the people in your agency, because no one person is the hero of R3, and no one person is the Jedi master of it. This is everybody. This is a lift that has to occur with everyone who will hear you, everyone who will jump in and participate with you, and go in there. And just to illustrate a little bit on that front, you know, as we've gone to some of these meetings, I will say one of the things that impressed me a tremendous amount in our agency was that on some of these R3 meetings and opportunities we've had to discuss these issues and engage in it, we've had officers step up and join us at those meetings. Not because we went out there and anyone used authority over them, you know, as a director or whatever, to tell them that they would participate, but because they believe in something. And they went out and jumped in the mix with everybody. And like I said, our biologists on our resource side have done that. Our fisheries folks have done that. They have stepped in and taken on new ideas and new approaches and provided a lot, not because of one person asking them to, but because they own it as equitably as the rest of us. And so with that, I'm going to just allow an opportunity to open up for some questions, and hopefully I can answer them as best you can.
Thanks, Lance. That was really awesome information. We do have some questions rolling in, but I wanted to follow up on something you just touched on, which is the organizational culture that you say is really open to what you're doing here. And so I'm wondering if you had to go through, or you have any advice for people who might be trying to overcome some barriers within their organization to implementing some of these steps, even when we have a successful model that you've shown the license sale data. So did you face any of those barriers with people telling you, no, you can't do that, or you don't have the personnel to do that? I know you said there's some issues with the analysis and data collection. But could you just expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I don't really feel like any of this along the way has been too hard of a sell. Certainly the agency culture that exists out there, people don't like change, and it is hard to make those changes. But when we implemented that customer identification number and we're able to look at our customers, and we can get that really truly in lifetime numbers. Our folks can pull that data anytime in any way that we want, and the numbers don't lie. In an agency like ours, where you're filled with a lot of folks with scientific backgrounds, the data really is one of the most powerful tools you have to have and engage in some of those conversations. These are the same people, if you stop and consider, that took populations of wildlife that were virtually gone and non-existent in the early 1900s and put them back on the ground. And so if they start to recognize, if you can work in a way to help them recognize that what you're talking about is the extinction of hunters and anglers. It's a group of people that we were losing at those same kind of pace and numbers. It's a situation that all of us are paid by those license dollars. That pays our wages. That's how we get to do what we love to do. I think once you overcome the hurdle that they recognize that's really where a lot of the buy-in and the ownership starts to take place. And I think you really have to start at the grassroots and the boots on the ground, because that army of individuals will help you shift and change that agency culture, literally from the bottom up in a lot of ways. I was very fortunate in this state to have support all the way through the top of my leadership, with our director and with our commissions, to make these changes and to move forward with it.
Okay, that's excellent. Thanks for that. We do have a few questions from the audience, so I'll just start asking. Jennifer Zdusky wants to know, how did you get officers to stop wanting to be cops and start wanting to be teachers and mentors? You did touch on that and say, it's up to them and you don't ask them to do that. So I'm wondering if that's just sort of the culture of your area. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I can, and it's going to be opinion, and it's going to be my own perception, per se, without hitting them directly on this. But my own perception on it is that as we were having this crisis, there was a moment in time when a lot of the education programs we had in our department were placed on those guys as a burden, as opposed to allowing them an opportunity to have their own ideas and their own approach. And so, when I became chief of this division, one of the things I wanted to do was take, all the previous year's experience when I didn't directly impact those programs, to have listened to what they had said. And what they had said really was that they had other ideas that they wanted to try and other things that they needed to do. And I think you have to reciprocate with other staff to give them the opportunity to have their own successes and failures as well. And in short time, quite honestly, really the different divisions of folks who work out there, they put their own peer pressure on themselves to go outperform each other. The most amazing thing to me was, we went out to try to knock out a situation where we could boast that we had done at least a camp and a half a day per calendar year, and those guys stepped up to the challenge to match us. And so it was a blink of an eye before we had what is averaged out to about 3 camps a day, or three educational opportunities a day, and there's a competitive nature in those folks that if given the opportunity to compete with you, they're going to go try and whip you, and I think it's healthy.
That's definitely admirable. And yeah, I mean, if we could have more people like that, I think that would be awesome. And hopefully that is the direction that we're moving with what we're doing in this field. So we'll go to our next question from Bruce Rich. He says, with the 900 plus workshops and 48,000 folks, quote, touched, over how long of a time period was that? So that's kind of a nice segue from what you were just talking about, your almost 3 events a day, which is just insane.
It really is, and again, that's that heavy lift. A lot of people can do a lot of work in a short time, and that's what I've discovered is that by it being an everyone problem, you start to have so many more people all part of the same team and pulling in the same direction, and that's been critical. The numbers I throw, that's not a duration, that's a year. In 1 year's time, those folks reach 10% of our youth population, those folks. And it's a testament to the commitment and the workload that folks are willing to do. I think people can pretty much rise to any challenge if given the opportunity, and they find creative ways to get out there and mix it up. And it really is one of those things that has made our programs work.
That's really impressive. I also didn't realize that was just for a year, so wow. You guys are doing super great things. We have another question from Jennifer. She says, do you try to measure your outreach? So I know that we talked about how you guys don't exactly have the personnel to do all these metrics, so maybe a better follow-up question to that would be, how have you measured what you have measured, and do you have plans to add metrics in the future?
Right. So on the outreach side, I can't say we put too much effort into measuring all of them. There is a very specific instance that very recently that we did put a measure to it, and that was we had purchased what was the big kind of more industry retail outdoor adventure show that was being held. And we also were doing an outdoor expo. So we had 2 events that were what we believed, what our hypothesis was reaching the same audience over and over. And as we kind of mapped some of our R3 efforts and looked at some of these, how they fit in that R3 model, we really had that belief. So we did go out and spend some time and put the effort in to survey our participants on both those events, and actually found it to be 100% true that we were reaching the same audience over and over, except we were spending twice the money for the same effort. And so we did discontinue that outdoor expo on the one side of the year. We kept the one that we had found a way to generate the kind of funds that would make it pay for itself. And so we continue to do that, but have redeployed that funding and the effort of so many department staff that would attend that one outdoor expo event. Just let them redeploy out into other things, and that was one outreach effort that we did truly measure. But for the most part, on the other side, when we deal with our media, it's all the standard metrics that you would follow. I never buy any radio from anyone who can't provide me some numbers and feedback on what kind of reach we're having with those folks. All of our social media, there's all the analytics to follow and web and so forth. Using GovDelivery lets us, when we push out press releases, lets us track and see how many of those were open, how many were read, how many were acted upon. It lets us also look at also have a media tracking side of it, which lets us look at how many sources those get out to and are distributed to. It helps us kind of keep track of those types of things. And then I'm fortunate to have our information call center attached within our division because they are, again, those boots on the ground kind of folks who take calls from customers on a regular basis, and they know where folks find information. And so we use them in that manner to help us make good decisions.
Okay, awesome. So you didn't totally dive in without a plan or numbers. It sounds like you guys are actually doing a lot of great things with the analytics and the metrics that you do have. So our next question is from Samantha, and they're pretty steadily rolling in, so we're going to keep trucking through these questions. She asks, if you had to point a state in a direction to try something new and risk failing, where might you suggest they start?
So the first and foremost, I think the biggest piece along the way, especially since so many agencies have started to make that transition to customer ID numbers and online systems, I would say throw the baby out with the bathwater and go to skills-based education. You know, you have to know at this point in the game, there's been enough research and enough discussion that our baby boomers are aging out. And it was a generation of folks who did not pass those skills on to the Gen Xers and beyond. And so your parents of your next generation of youth that are coming into play, and they're already starting to become our customers, don't have the support they need to go out and be successful. You've got to change your programs to teach those skills to both adults and kids. And I would venture to say, take a crack at it. Go try to fail. But I think what you'll find is that you're going to find a lot of success in it.
That's a great answer. Our next question is from Tim. He says, nice work. Do you have a cost per touch or cost per camp? And then do you recoup your investment today, in the future? Do you have a timeline? So what's your return on investment here?
Okay, so a lot of our camps, for the most part, are paid and funded even through our PR dollars. And so here's a best-kept secret that shouldn't be a secret to anybody. What we did in our state is that we developed a grant for camp contracts that crosses over both PR dollars and DJ dollars. And our region our Whisper region was really helpful in helping us establish that, so we could put together that kind of scope of work, and we can bounce off that grant to recoup costs. And so we try as often as possible to use those dollars to, we only need a quarter of total cost to get maximum funding off of it. So a lot of our camps don't cost at all. We're not necessarily worried about recouping the costs off those because we have that grant in place. Mostly what we worry about is meeting the purpose statement of our grant and trying to get those things on the ground as fast as we can so we can open and close those grants.
Yeah, that's a really important question, so thanks, Tim, for that. I feel like money is definitely what it always comes down to. We all know that, and so that's an unfortunate barrier that we have to cross, but I think you made a really good point, and I like that you called it the best-kept secret. That's kind of funny. Next, we have Tammy, who says, when seeking new participants, what emphasis is placed on outreach to diverse audiences?
So literally for us in our state, diversity is just really huge. Our demographic of our state is diverse by nature, and so we focus, like I say, very much on inclusion and not targeting diversity. Inclusion is just pulling everyone together. Matt Dunphy at one point had said that the silver bullet to R3 is take someone hunting or fishing that doesn't look or sound like you. I believe that. And our folks, I think, believe that. And so Um, what we just do is that we try to take our message into places that you wouldn't normally expect. We don't shy away from the church groups or the other kinds of organizations of individuals that are out there, and we sure as heck don't shy away from talking to people that don't necessarily come engage with us up front. You know, we're more than willing to talk about what we do to lots of people in pretty much our daily lives.
Yeah, inclusivity is so important, especially if, you know, you can get people in there who don't necessarily look like the stereotypical hunter, and then they can kind of do some of the legwork for you, attracting other people that look like them rather than people that look like us, maybe. So Chris Mitchell has a question. Has New Mexico considered increasing non-resident percentages, or is resident demand not met? So I think that has to do with out-of-state tags.
So that is one of those things that is legislatively pushed to us. You know, our statutes break out the percentages of resident versus non-resident opportunities that we can put out there. You know, when it comes to some of our small game or over-the-counter type opportunities, you know, that's something that we don't hesitate to, you know, encourage folks no matter where they're at to come give us a shot and try it out. But, you know, I do look at it, our big game opportunities in particular are very limited. It's a limited resource. Yet for the last handful of years, we continue to set records for people showing their interest in coming and giving it a shot out here. And so I don't see that changing too much, particularly when you start to look at things like Cow Elk, where our residents have made it pretty clear that they want those opportunities kept here for them. But then we have private land systems and other opportunities like that open the door for those folks too.
That sounds totally reasonable. Warner Bars says, after your camps, do you provide the participants any resources or information about opportunities to continue these activities? An example might be another organization offering a mentored hunt in the state, or upcoming fishing events, or things like that.
So a lot of our camps, we try to make sure that those nonprofits participate with us, that they're there so that those relationships are being built on the front end. We do continually try to any opportunities that we have, get them out there. We tell folks to track us, again, on the consistency of message and marketing. Track us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, whatever you're most comfortable in, but we push those out and we try and keep them posted to make sure that they know they have those additional opportunities. And what we actually find too is that a lot of times, just the nature of the camps, there are relationships built between the participants that I think are beneficial too. That is an area that as we start to look at some of the finer details of things that we might work on to do a little better or a little stronger, that's one of those things, is that distribution of information or plugging them into additional next steps beyond attending one or two camps.
Yeah, those multiple touch points, as we know, are very important. So I think it's really cool that you guys have those partnerships that you can, you know, go to for events and then have them follow up directly. That's a really good system. Our last question comes from Catherine Boswell from Wyoming Game and Fish. She wants to know if you have any suggestions for marketing these camps or learning opportunities to adults.
So yes, and you know, we do make some solid efforts to getting out, particularly at some of our retailers and setting up evenings. Sportsman's Warehouse out here has been frequently having like a ladies' evening, and our folks go out there to talk about those opportunities. But more importantly, I think the one thing that we have done is we've gotten a little tactical and strategic about those adult opportunities too, and we know that typically what we'll do is we will require in many of our camps in that an adult or a mentor or somebody who these individuals can be a responsible adult with them attend and participate with us. And when they get there, there's many of them who think, well, I'm going to sit in the chair and watch them go have fun shooting, but we don't let that happen. We engage with them immediately to become an active student with those who are attending those other classes. And so I think of our adult outreach program as being one of the key components or factors attached to the rest of our traditional youth programs. And so I think that's been successful for us. But we have done some things, have had this great partnership, and have the Mule Deer Foundation take a tremendous lead for us in establishing those program for our women in the state, which really it's just awesome because they have also focused on just skills-based type education, not some of the things that programs used to think they needed to do to lure a different group of folks in. They've went nuts and bolts. They will teach you how to shoot and hunt and do these kinds of things that I think are important. I also think real important to not assume that people, because they're in any part of any age or demographic, don't want to learn these things. That's a bad assumption. I think people in general do. And so that might beat a little bit around the question, but I think that might kind of hit it.
Yeah, and I think that catering to some of those adult programs is really important for a variety of reasons, which we can talk about in our discussion about this webinar tomorrow on the R3 community. So look out for that. And Bruce did point out that I missed one of his questions, so we'll go back really quick. We are running out of time. But Bruce says that growth in New Mexico hunting and angling license sales and numbers was impressive from early to late 20-teens. But the huge jump is between 2011 to 2012 with your change in license methodology. It almost seems like your true baseline was reflected right after the licensing change. So would you say that's correct?
So yes and no. I typically start with that 2011 data set, admittedly primarily because it's the one I feel most confident capturing. But we did look at our numbers going all the way back to the early 90s, and we had what matches up an identical trajectory of decline that was sliding in, and right there at that 2010, 2011 license year is when we had rock bottom occur. And so the numbers that I presented and show are matchups to, up to that point, really, we all kind of depended pretty heavily on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey to provide our numbers, which, there's no one to blame for that. That's what we did for 100 years, however long that's been running. We depended on that, and as those numbers just declined and dipped, the reason I use that data set is I know that baseline number as a start in 2011 to be true. And so that's where I set my presentation for the most part when I talk about what we've done here on. And it's not
Excellent.
a surprise for me that the first year would be a big rise because in the first year, again, it's about the customer and giving the customers what they want. And what we really did was we connected and engaged with them, and they started to become a part of the process. So it doesn't surprise me to see a rise right out of the gate.
That's really great information. Well, we are right up to the wire, so thank you everybody for attending. If you look in the chat box, I did post a link to a survey gizmo. It should only take like 2 minutes or maybe less to give us some feedback about our webinar process, and that will help me cater to you guys' interests for future webinars. And like I mentioned, we will be having a discussion about this webinar tomorrow on the R3 community. That's nationalr3plan.com. If you're not a member, feel free to go ahead and join, and I'll add you. And then you can join in the conversation. So thanks so much, Lance. This information was amazing and really helpful, and hopefully some people got some good things out of it. And thanks for everybody attending. Y'all have a great day.